Good evening, everyone. Welcome to Amateur Astronomers, Inc., also known as AAI, for our weekly Fridays at Sperry presentation. AAI makes its home at William Miller Sperry Observatory on the campus of Union County College in Cranford, New Jersey. You can also view our live stream on Facebook and YouTube, or follow AAI on Instagram at amateur.astronomers.inc. If you're interested in joining AAI, go to our website, which is www.asterism.org, and click on Join AAI. Our presenter this evening is AAI member Al Witzgall. He has been interested in astronomy since he was 7 years old. He's an active AAI club member for the past 51 years. He's a past AAI vice president and AAI president. He's made optics for the NASA Probe Galaxy GAL-AX launch in April 2003. Named for the Galaxy Evolution Explorer, it's an orbital space telescope designed to observe the universe in ultraviolet wavelengths. Al's handiwork is on the Scopes Prism grading system. Al's built award-winning telescopes, does public outreach, promotional astronomy, and also our club's recording secretary and qualified observer. Tonight, Al will talk about the flight of Artemis 1 and our return to the moon. Okay, Al?
Thank you. And good evening, everybody. I hope you can see me, at least. Yeah, we're going to be talking about Artemis 1, return to the moon. This is actually a very exciting thing because when I was a kid, we were, it's scary. I've watched it from Mercury go all the way through Apollo, and now returning to the moon. It's going to be remarkable. And we are on the verge of a new era in space exploration. The Artemis program has begun taking us back to the moon, and hopefully then on to Mars. We're going to begin with a discussion of the Apollo and Artemis programs and their associated technologies. So here we have actually this on the left, you see Apollo with the service and command module there. I believe this is from Apollo 11. They still didn't take the blue coating, protective coating off the vehicle. Here, of course, we have Orion, somewhat larger in diameter. We'll talk about that in a moment. And again, still being worked on in this case. I think this was Artemis 1. Okay, so there's a comparison. You can see for yourself, command module in Apollo was set up so that 3 people could occupy it. You had 70 cubic feet per person. The mission support was 14 days for 3 crew. Power source were fuel cells. Orion, just a little bit taller. The diameter is a good deal more. Habitable volume is pretty good, 314 cubic feet compared with 210. The launch weight and landing weight is all through here. The height of the vehicle actually is a little bit stubbier. It's 16 feet versus 22 and 7. Diameter about 13 and a half feet. And the launch weight of 34,000 plus pounds. Performance in this case, it's a 4-man person crew. Habitable volume 78.5 cubic feet per person. It's a little tight still. Mission support for 21 days for crew. Its power source is solar array, solar cells. Here's Apollo on orbit, and of course below it is the moon. A little hint of where we're going back. This shows the service module with the experiments exposed to space. There's that large bell for the main engine. Okay. The Orion crew exploration vehicle. The crew module is what we're going to be concentrating a little more on. Spacecraft adapter, which allowed this to be put on the Ares launch vehicle. The launch abort system, both could carry, in an emergency, carry the command module here, the crew module, out and away from any trouble Say if you have a problem with an engine on the main stack, as they call it, you can get away quickly. And the service module in this case, propulsion, electrical power, and fluid storage. Okay. This is Orion in its mounted configuration, so it could be worked upon. Okay, and again, to get scale, the young lady over here stood, if I remember the brochure, at about 5'5". So it's a rather large vehicle. Here's the overview. And crew capable 4 people from beyond low Earth orbit, providing safe haven from launch through landing and recovery. Service module, as the name implies, allows for electrical equipment. The solar power panels would come out from there. The service module itself, by the way, interestingly, that was built by the European Space Agency. Now, don't laugh, because we're so used to our computers virtually being handheld now. This was the Apollo guidance computer. This was the keyboard that you would put in various commands and a special code that would go with it. This is about the size of your average. Well, actually, it's not. If you had a 486, it's about the size of the box originally, and that's the memory, folks. This is called core rope memory test sample from Apollo program, and they had this woman and several others that were able to wire all this together. It's
They would be jumping up and down if they had one of our cell phones.
oh, forget it. Yeah, that'd be a jump of technology.
Like 100-fold.
A little more than that. Okay. So how better are the computers? You can read it yourself here. It's no surprise computer tech is much more advanced than Apollo. And unlike the Apollo capsule, single flight computer just had one. Orion's got 2 redundant machines operating simultaneously, and each one has 2 redundant. So you got 4 redundant systems. So it had to take some kind of major disaster to knock all 4 out. Their computers in Orion hold significantly more memory and operate at far faster speeds than an Apollo era computer. NASA has stated that the Orion computer operates at 20,000 times faster, and the memory is 128,000 times greater.
And that's a little bit more than 100.
Yeah, a little bit. Okay, so here we have the Saturn V. I'm sorry, folks. I love this machine. This is the first stage. This thing, you got to see it to believe it. There are only 3, I believe, that are. They had 4. One was used for Skylab 1, and the other 3 went to museums, the National Air and Space Museum and the Alabama Space and Rocket Museum has the other one. So when I saw it, Bonnie and I walked the 363 feet from the engines here all the way to where the command module would be. This is, again, a Saturn V, 5 engines. The total amount of thrust here is about 7.5 million pounds of thrust for the first stage. This really gets you off the ground. These guys do pretty well too. This is Artemis. Each of these are based on the old F1 engines. Actually, they call it F1A. Figure, but they're a little bit upgraded. So each one of these puts out 2 million pounds of thrust, a total of 8 million pounds. So she's a lot more powerful and ready for launch. A nice little comparison. Actually, Artemis is a few, I think about 25 feet taller than the Saturn V. And I love this shot because, of course, it's got the destination in the background. This one, I think yeah, we do have a picture. That's right. Because it was already higher up in the sky when this was taken. There we go. So this is the basic game plan. Artemis 1 was the first human spacecraft to the moon in the 21st century, but there was nobody aboard. It just had a triplet of dummies that were wired and set up with sensors so that they would be able to see radiation, gravity effects, just about everything. Artemis 2 will be the first one to have humans orbiting the moon. Actually, it's going to do more of a flyby than an orbit. Artemis support mission, the first high-power solar electric propulsion, at least that's proposed. I have not heard very much about that at all. The support mission, first pressurized module delivered to Gateway, and we'll get to that first space station in a little bit. Support mission, human landing system is delivered to Gateway. And then finally, Artemis 3 crewed mission to Gateway and the lunar surface. And this basically is all pretty much self-explanatory. Hopefully, we will have our first crew after around 20. Well, this here was said 2024 is probably going to be close to 2026, but we'll see. And the next giant leap, of course, it's great to have orbital space stations around the Earth. ISS is quite a beautiful piece of the technology, and it's constantly being updated. This is Gateway. This will, as the name implies, be the gateway apparently to from the Earth to the Moon, possibly even eventually Earth to Mars. And getting around when you're on the Moon, Apollo used a roving vehicle to extend the range of astronauts' exploration, as well as finding a more diverse selection of lunar samples. Artemis will do the same, but with longer traverses on the Moon and again, eventually on Mars. Okay, so here's the game plan. And I think I have to update this a little bit. But Artemis 1 was an uncrewed mission to the Moon and back, testing performance of the Space Launch System. Artemis 2, which will be coming up next year, hopefully it'll be a 10-day mission, a first crewed test flight. It's going to take 4 astronauts to within 8,800 kilometers beyond the Moon, further than any humans ever been to date, and complete lunar flyby before return. Then again, Artemis 3, 2025, that may be pushed back to 2026 from what I've heard. About 30-day mission, first moon landing since Apollo 17, 1972. I can't believe it's that long that we've gone back. For astronauts who will dock with the Lunar Gateway, remain in space for 30 days. The lunar lander will then take 1 man and 1 woman, finally, it's no longer a boys' club, thank God, down to the Moon's south pole to conduct experiments over about a week. Artemis 4, 2026, maybe 27, about 30-day mission. No lunar landing, but it's going to deliver the International Habitation Module to the Lunar Gateway. The European Space Agency is with us, along with the Japanese, or JAXA, as it's called, Japanese Aerospace Exploration Agency. IHAB will provide main living space for astronauts at the station. Whoops, sorry, there we go. Then Artemis 5, 2026. The mission will deliver a Canadian-built robotic arm and is Spirit, refueling and communications module to the Lunar Gateway. 2 of 4 strong crew will then fly down to the lunar South Pole with NASA's Lunar Terrain Vehicle on board the lander. At least that's the game plan so far. Passengers for Artemis 1 essentially were 3 test dummies. But this is very critical. You don't want to put somebody out in the vehicle that has not been tried. The engineering says it's good. It's better to have actual data from the mission, a mission itself, which is why these are outfitted with various sensors, particularly for radiation, gravity changes, the works. And since while you were up there, they found that there was room in one of the coupling segments that they could put as many as a dozen sub-satellites, small units of CubeSats, as they're called. About half of them actually worked. And we lost 3 before the mission started because their batteries ran out. There was no, quite frankly, there was no time to recharge. And the other 2 were lost on work, which is a shame. However, it does show the concept. Well, you know, as they say, since you're out there, why not send something else? Okay, so here's the phase 1, path to the lunar surface. Again, this has just happened. First human spacecraft to the Moon in the 21st century. Artemis 2, first humans to orbit the Moon in the 21st century. The support modules would go up to build a gateway. Then Artemis support mission to human landing system delivered. And finally, Artemis 3, crewed mission to gateway and lunar surface. So hopefully by 2020, it says here 2024, they keep on moving it back and forth the dates. But hopefully no later than 2026, we will have blueprints, new blueprints on the Moon. And this is the basic flight overview from launch, the Kennedy Space Center, Earth orbit, then from there, about roughly 206 hours on a precise trajectory for the Moon. And essentially, the total mission was 42 days, which was pushing everything to its limits. And successful orbit and return back to Earth. Readying for flight. I love pictures like this. It's an idea of just how big we humans, we poor little humans, can think and dream and build. You can walk into these engines. Okay. And ready to explore. I had to put this picture in. It was so cool. I had to move the background and all set, Artemis 1 all ready to go. So let's light this candle. And there's liftoff on November 16th of 2022. And again, it's one of these things where you go along the web and you finally get a view, a picture just stops you in your tracks. There it is, Destination Moon. With apologies to Universal Films. But you can see from the heat of the main, actually it's the 4 engines are firing as well as the solids. And you can see some of the steam effects over here distorting the moon, the image of the moon. So it's really, really great. And where no one has gone in 48 years. And this is the lunar far side, which we almost never get to see any part of it except maybe an extreme libration. In other words, the nodding of the moon north, south, east, west. And you're looking at an area where humans have seen this. When Apollo went on orbit around the moon, they would see this. I think it was like around about every 70 or 80 minutes, maybe a little less, a little more. But they were able to see what we poor humans down here have never seen before with their own eyes and cameras. Okay, and I love this shot here too. My degree is in geology, and I guess you call me a planetary astronomer. Seeing this, there's an old saying in planetary astronomy that a crater is a poor geologist's core sampler, because you're punching through the regolith, the surface of the moon. Look at this. It's all dark material, yet these craters are relatively bright. This had to come just from looking at the shape of it from these 2 impacts. What is this material here? What's this dark stuff? So hopefully maybe we'll get some information on that one day. And I look at everything else over here. You see lava, what appear to be lava flows, these fissures here. And of course over here, a beautiful formed impact crater. And again, another one of these, there must be some dark material underneath here, because here's another one, almost the same brightness. This is remarkable. Okay, and finally running back for home. And again, this is like something that we only saw in science fiction. Now we're seeing it up close and personal. So there's the moon, and then of course there's us. Excellent, excellent photo. And we're getting close. Just before they jettisoned the service module, they took a photograph back on Earth. Beautiful. Okay, and back home, the classic 3 parachutes. Okay, and the flotation devices. And
You know
look
the
good.
diameter of the actual chutes?
I don't know that, to be
Must
honest
be
with you.
pretty big.
I would guesstimate maybe. Let's go back one. Let's see. Oh, yeah, I would say that, sure.
100 feet each, maybe more?
I would say 80, 120 feet, thereabout.
They'd have to be bigger than Apollo.
A lot bigger.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I would say that's about right. So, again, looks good. These balloons basically inflate just like Apollo had. One of them, I think it was 12, Apollo 12 landed upside down, just flipped over, and they inflated these, woof, came right back up. But apparently, there was a little more charring on the heat shield underneath here. You can't see it in the water. Okay. And currently, the mission is being analyzed, and the performance of the spacecraft, of course, is being evaluated. If all's gone well, Artemis 2 will be a crewed mission in 2025. It'll be the furthest humans have ever traveled from Earth in the history of spaceflight. Okay, and this is what Artemis 2 will do. It's a little disappointing to me, because I would love to have seen this go into orbit. It'll get within, I believe it's 4,400 miles of the surface of the far side of the moon before it turns around, comes back to Earth. You can get this and read more in depth on the web, on the NASA website for Artemis. And Artemis 3, which is what I'm hoping for finally, launching from Earth, going to Gateway, and then descending down and ascending and coming home. So this is the game plan for Artemis 3. Hopefully there'll be a lot more landings that will follow this. So it's ready to land. There's the landing vehicle just before it attaches from Artemis. And possible South Polar landings. Now, you probably folks already probably know this, but one of the big reasons we're going back to the lunar South Pole is the fact that we are getting tantalizing information about the fact that there seems to be water ice just below the regolith. Maybe you kick it over to one side, and there it is, because the South Polar region has a lot of shadows. Some areas the craters don't ever experience the light of sun. With a little bit of luck, you may have megatons of water waiting for us. If you have water, you have, besides drinking it, obviously, and preparing food, you have cooling systems, you have oxygen and hydrogen that you can break apart and use as rocket fuel. And for fuel cells, lots of stuff. So this is very critical. The whole idea is trying not to. Okay. Hopefully not. Oh, okay. Well, they're honking. They're honking if you want to explore the moon.
They want to go to the North Pole.
Oh well, there you are. Well, we're going to get a visit from the North Pole here. Anyway, but the South Pole has more shadow. So hopefully there's going to be a lot of ice there. I'm wondering, in that ice, you might find what's remnants of comets that impacted the moon. And you have to filter that out. But with a little bit of luck, if you have water, you can go almost anywhere in the solar system. And a rover is needed. This is from Apollo 15. Notice that there's nobody here because the astronauts have walked away to take a picture and also to sample the lunar surface. But there's a picture that follows this from 15. But you see this, the module's not that far away. You could walk this. Matter of fact, if something had gone wrong with the rover on Apollos 15, 16, or 17, they didn't traverse any further than their own suits and emergency oxygen to take them. So they were limited by that. And it's a very good idea, especially if this thing breaks down. They did have some problems with it. The fenders had a tendency to fall off. But, okay, so this is why we need a rover. Look at Apollo 11, about 3,300 feet, which traveled. Apollo 12, 4,500 feet traveled. Apollo 14, 9,000. Apollo 15 went 17 and a half miles. 16 was 16.6. And Apollo 17, they had a geologist on board. He wanted to go everywhere, and I don't blame him. Jack Schmidt, 22.3 miles.
It should have been Gene Schumacher.
Tell me about it. I know. He tried for it, but he developed, I think it was Addison's disease.
Yeah.
Yeah, the adrenal glands had the nerve to shut down on him. Now, here on Earth, it's like an injection. In fact, I think now it's a pill per day. But the thing was, if something went wrong and they were outside of the limits of whatever he would have to be injecting to himself to keep himself alive, he would have died on the way home. So they didn't want to. They had to have perfect people. Nowadays, the way I look at it, maybe there's a little hope for me too, because their idea was to take a 75-year-old geologist with a mild heart trouble out to the moon and back safely. That was the whole idea of Apollo, and eventually it will be. But without those LRVs, lunar roving vehicles, we'd have only 15%, maybe even less than that, of the specimens that we study today.
I'm sure Gene would have said, I want to go anyway, what a way to die.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised, to be honest with you. Okay, this is an early rover concept. It's not in this picture with these gentlemen over here, but there were two. It sounds like a terrible story. Excuse me, man. See, there were these two good friends that decided to take a similar vehicle like this around, and they would live in it. I think they lived in it for 2 weeks. At the end of the 2 weeks, they were, shall we say, not very good friends anymore. Yeah, and it was from a psychological point of view. For some reason, we humans are a social animal, but sometimes we got to get away from people, just for a little while. And apparently,
Maybe
they
a man
couldn't.
and a woman would need.
Well, I don't want to go there. Well, hopefully, we will not have chauvinism following us into space. But it was kind of a shame too, because before that, they were best friends. the psychology of this is going to be studied forever. Okay. And that was the LRV for Apollo 16. I have to correct myself. I believe I said 15 before. And now in 1994, just as a practice run, they went out to the American Southwest. I believe it was in Arizona. And they were sampling and trying out different concepts of rovers, even something that looks very much like something out of a later Star Trek, where they would have equipment on their arms or wrists using as sensors. And they even had these two vehicles set up so that they could rove relatively flat land, sure, but at least it was an attempt. Okay, a modern rover proposal, actually, this is shamelessly borrowed from the Soviets, the old Russian suits, where they would have a hatch on the back. You would jump in there, you close the hatch, lock it, and then detach from the main vehicle without having to worry about vacuum and such. It's a great idea, and that's exactly how these are going to be set up, at least at this concept. Of course, they're using rubber tires, which is cheating, but they can be pressurized. You don't have that on the moon.
Wait a minute, back up a little bit with that lack of a vacuum. How did they do it?
Well, what they did was they had wire rims. That make a good lecture, actually. On the, I think I did that once on the lunar roving vehicle. They used steel mesh, and I think it was steel mesh and aluminum plates that allowed them to be able to operate as tires. And they did pretty good too, as a matter of fact. In this case, they didn't want to spend $1 million a tire, so they ended up using plain old tires. But the concept is still there, still works.
Yeah, but I'm not understanding, how did they prevent a vacuum? If you have to go in to one small cubicle and then into the vehicle,
Mhm.
there's gotta be a vacuum in the outer, when they open the door.
Well, when they open the door, the suit is locked in there, it's sealed. They put their legs in first, go forward, and then the door would close behind them. They could pull it close themselves if they wanted. And then there's a seal. That door stays in place. That's the air seal. And then they just attach and walk away. When they come back, they back against it. So I don't have the, I wish I did have that slide. I don't have a slide of that here, but I have seen it. I'll have to put that in. Maybe next time I do a lecture, I'll have, somebody had a question on. So.
Go back to the, so I go forward to the slide.
Mhm.
Done. Stop.
Right
Okay.
there. So you see, they're
So
backed up
draw
against this.
From inside that rover.
Yeah.
The back of the suit has a slit, and you crawl into the suit.
And you
Put
close.
your legs in
Yeah.
first, put your arms in first, you put your
Mhm.
head up in those two black helmets.
Oh, I see, that's, you don't.
Yeah.
You don't, and then it seals and you don't lose any air.
That's
Okay.
exactly, or very little. That's
got it.
correct.
The suits
Yeah.
are stored outside.
I'm gonna see. I'm
They
gonna
don't
see if I
get
can.
dressed inside.
Yeah. Well, you don't want to get
Walk out.
moon dust
They just
in all over
climb
the
into it and then
interior of the vehicle.
seals, so they do something. but very-
So, okay. So, new portal to space is Gateway. This is the configuration. Shows everybody that's with us on this. NASA, the Canadian Space Agency, the Japanese group,
European too.
the European Space Agency. That's right. A multi-purpose module comes from the Russians, of all people. And yeah, the Spirit, there it is. And propulsion and power management is done with NASA. So with a little bit of luck, this will be a space station about 76,000 miles away from the moon, basically in I think it's the L3 point, L2 or L3 point. I don't have the information in front of me, but it will basically just stay there, balanced between the gravity of the Earth and the moon.
So it wouldn't orbit, it would be locked in just the way the moon is.
That's right.
Okay.
And again, this is an overview of everything and who's building what where. And a practice module just to make sure everything's working. All these people did not live in that thing, but they did have the crews that are, of course, in NASA Blue over here at Lockheed Martin, and they took turns working with it, and it seemed to work out pretty well.
It would be like the clowns in the circus getting into Volkswagen.
Yeah, well. Okay. And in the future, Artemis prepares for Mars. We'll be testing landing and descent capabilities, the range of surface exploration, gateway augmented with an international habitat for increased capabilities. So this is going to evolve, and eventually we'll have a Mars mission dress rehearsal, longer in space and surface durations. It ain't going to be tomorrow. I'm guessing around the year 2040, 2045. That's still within the lifetime of a lot of people in this room. And with the younger people, they're going to see this and say, "Oh, it was old hat. I saw that back in 2023." But there we are. So hopefully we'll get enough practice on the moon with surface exploration, not just to understand the moon, but get ready for Mars. Boldly going. Nice little overview. Technology, exploration, and science all coming together. A little dated because that's solar electric propulsion. We're wondering about that. That was used for an asteroid redirect mission and did work out pretty well, but they didn't have the solar electric on it.
Where's the SpaceX?
Sorry?
Where's the SpaceX part of this?
Oh, SpaceX. Honestly, I thought we had that here, right here.
You know, the lander, the moon lander was not involved with SpaceX either. And I think that's.
Well, to be honest with you, it hasn't been built yet. I just put those shots in there just to give an idea of what would be needed.
Right.
So maybe in 2034, boy, am I praying. A voyage to Mars. This is scandalously taken from National Geographic, to which I thank them for this. Voyage to Mars, a basic habitation module, and propelled in this case, apparently by an advanced Artemis upper stage. I think it's probably going to be, I believe it's going to be nuclear electric, but we'll see. Okay. Who knows? 2037, again, we're very optimistic over here, folks. Maybe we will see something like this in many of our lifetimes here. And who knows? And a thought, I love this. Great quote. There are places to go beyond belief. Oh, yeah. And Mark Twain. Now, he wrote this, I think it was in 1890, thereabouts, relatively young man at the time, but 20 years from now. Absolutely perfect. Dream, explore, discover. Okay, to a new beginning. Yeah. This is Apollo 8. This was Christmas around the moon. And no matter what anybody says, it was Bill Anders had the only color camera aboard Apollo 8, and he took the color photo. All three of those guys said that they took the color picture. It was Bill Anders. But what a great shot.
It's a Hasselblad, right?
Yeah. I don't know what model, but it was I know it was a 500 millimeter telephoto, and he had the only color camera. So therefore, so I have to thank for production work, Bonnie, who makes sure things are centered, makes sure that I get the spelling right. Are you sure it's I before you have to C and all that? Mary Duca allowed me to give this presentation. I wish she could have been here. Frank Pavlix, who was the designer of the original lunar roving vehicle. And the 400,000, imagine this, 400,000 astronauts, technicians, and craftspeople, all these ladies and gentlemen that made Apollo possible. And that's it.
Wow.
Now, I guess everybody unmutes themselves. I can take questions.
Al?
Yeah.
Not really a question, just an observation or editorial.
Mm-hmm.
John Glenn went out and he worked in politics and became a senator, I believe, from Ohio.
Yes.
And so I think it might be a good idea for Artemis 1, 3 dummies, put them in the Senate and improve the Senate.
Okay. Observation is right. Anybody have any questions on the virtual imagery here?
Yeah, Al, can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Yeah, question about water ice. Can it refer to ammonia and methane as well as water?
Yeah, I would imagine, yes. Now, if it's from cometary, we know that it's mostly water, but there will be impurities in there, and some of them you could use. I mean, methane, burn methane with liquid oxygen, you can get off Earth real quick. Possibly, we also find other organics too. Hopefully, nothing alive, but we'll see what happens.
I bet you wouldn't want to drink the stuff first melting it. You want to distill it.
Yeah, there you go. That's exactly what they would do. They'll distill it, and then after that, probably add some minerals too, because you can't drink distilled water very long, at least not safely. But the other gases and other materials could probably be used for something else.
Can you imagine if they found something alive?
That's what worries me.
No. Just it would be a great discovery.
No, it would be a great discovery, but the problem is, what if whatever it is, the organic is relatively alive and hostile? I'm not talking about monsters. I'm talking about little, not quite even Andromeda strain.
They kill people with diseases.
Yeah. So we just have to be careful about it. That's all. But
Yeah, filter.
I mean, it's got a point.
Or boil it.
Yeah. Well, distilling it will kill almost. I think we kill
Yeah.
almost anything. Any other questions? How about our studio audience over here? Okay. Well, one thing that my audience here can do, which unfortunately you guys can't, is that I brought in, for those that can't wait, and in the words of the immortal Curly, gee, I can hardly wait too. I brought in part of my meteorite collection, which is a sample from the moon and from Mars. So if you can't wait, I'm going to have it set up over here. I will also have a magnifier, illuminated magnifier, so you can get a good close and personal look at Mars, or a rock that we know came from the moon and Mars. Oh, there we go. So you too can look at Mars or the moon. I'll set it up on the moon first. So, are there any other questions from the audience out here?
Yeah, what kind of sensors did they put on those dummies? So they could
Most of it was radiation. It was also gravimetric. They wanted to see the stress from how many Gs they were exposed to. Also, from temperature, pressures, everything. Basically, they were seeing the effects on the substitutes for humans, with a bent towards seeing anything hazardous. So far that I've heard, it isn't much. A human would have survived very easily.
Yeah, well,
Temperature was
Apollo, they survived Apollo.
Well, remember Apollo 13.
They
That
survived
could have been a
too.
problem, a very big one. But anyway, you look at it. Apparently, the vehicle, as far as I've heard, worked very well. So keep our fingers crossed for the crewed mission. That'd be
Yeah.
amazing.
Yeah, Tom Hanks did a good job in Apollo 13.
Now,
Yes.
if you're talking like a 20 or 30-year horizon to get to Mars,
Maybe.
so what are the top 2 or 3 engineering problems that need to get solved to make that feasible?
Okay. One of the biggest one is the human factor. It's nice to drop a robot on it. It's terrific. It can do all sorts of stuff. I've seen where they would have people on orbit around Mars and using remotes with maybe a tenth of a second delay to, in effect, walk around with a robot and have it pick up samples, put it into a container, which would be fired up to a orbital station, for example. As far as I have heard, we are just starting to design the actual vehicles to go there. We have to make it so that you don't have to keep on hoping that next month there's going to be a a drop of food and water and everything. We have to live off the land if possible. That's a whole new lecture in itself. Bon, you and I will have to get on it later. But there's a lot of problems with it. Going back to the moon, I'd say we're in pretty good shape. We can do it. The moon, if you've got a good braking system, you can get to the moon in about 8 hours with our current technology. The hard part is braking. You don't have air brakes, double pun there. But you could have a good solid engine that would allow you to fall into orbit around the moon and then drop food, water, games a whole bit. Yeah. Mars, I have heard, and I have yet to find who it is that's doing this idea. But the idea is you would be able, with this design of rocket vehicle, get from, you're sitting down, get from the Earth to Mars in 10 days. Now, I'm not too surprised about that because I know that they were doing early nuclear propulsion. And we're not talking the little nervers anymore. We're talking about, honest to God, big Dumbo engines, they used to call them. And the suckers had millions of pounds of thrust on board. These were designed, or at least engineered in the 1960s, early 70s. And no, it does not use a nuclear bomb out the back. Okay, because that was one idea. That is a way of getting around the solar system. But it would be like an upgraded Nerva, like a factor of maybe 10. But it could be done. We just have to have the will and desire to do it. Who knows? Future is still bright, folks. Any other questions or comments?
Yeah, if you think about the advance in technology from beginning of the 20th century to now,
Yeah.
it's crazy. It's such progress. So it seems to be multiplying exponentially. So
Oh, yeah.
I wouldn't be surprised if they do it by 2037 or 2035.
I hope so.
Yeah.
I personally, I do not want to die until we finally put a human boot print on the surface of Mars. And she says something very profound and wonderful. I hope so. Well, if there are no other questions, then one more. Go ahead.
I just want to make a comment or a recommendation. I recommended this one before. I want to remind everybody about one of the best science fiction stories ever written by John Bruner called "Report on the Nature of the Lunar System." If you ever read it, it's a very short story. It's incredible. Talks about one of the legends of what the moon is made of.
Well, I thank you for your attention, everybody. I hope you enjoyed it. And good evening. Now, like I said, the lights up, we'll come up here.
Good job, Al.
So, folks, the clouds are coming back, I'm told by Jim. So if you want to take a look, we're currently looking at June.